Chapter 10. Back to the Drawing Board. March 9th, 2086, Alpena, Michigan. Lawrence Ridge, Sarah Roberts, Jay Lansing, and Piper Russell were all native Michiganders. They were quite comfortable living in small, isolated settlements hidden away in the wilderness, sleeping in log cabins, clearing a path through the snow, and hunting deer in the forest came naturally to all four of them. This time of year, the dense pine forests were still covered in snow and ice, and traveling from one place to another was a difficult chore. But the four Wolverines were getting cabin fever. They had been here for 3 days already, and mostly recovered from the injuries they took earlier. Putting on heavy coats and boots, they trudged away from the safe house and into town. They did not go alone. 2 of the Stormbreakers were here with them as well. Maui Riri Nui and Kingi were both warm-blooded, and thus able to handle the cold. Setla and Nainu were reptiles, and thus unable to survive in this kind of weather. They stayed in the Wolverines' safe house, under the care of the other men who lived there. The town of Alpena was located on the shores of Thunder Bay, which led into Lake Huron. Right now, the bay was frozen solid, but if one looked far enough to the south, they could see the early warning signs of melting ice. Winter was almost over. Alpena itself was a very small town, home to about 5,000 humans and some 100 aliens. Since the United Nations had no presence here, the locals were very open about their loyalty to the old United States government. The American flag flew proudly from homes and businesses. The banner featured 13 red and white stripes running from left to right, and in one corner there was a blue field with 51 stars arranged in a circle. Huffing and puffing in the cold, the Wolverines, Kingi, and Maui made their way to the marina, right on the water's edge. No boats were moving today. Instead, hundreds of people were out on the frozen bay, ice fishing. Using augers, they drilled through the frozen water and set fishing line into the hole. Then the anglers would retreat into portable shelters, waiting for hapless fish to take the bait. At the marina, some merchants and traders braved the cold to sell their goods. The group made their way over to them, eager for something to eat that was not local game animals. None of the locals paid any attention to Maui or Kingi. Alpena's alien population was small, but varied enough for the 2 of them to blend in. They quickly ran to a stand that was selling fresh vegetables. Setla was an herbivore and needed a constant supply of green leaves to eat. It would be easier to find food for Nainu, firstly because he was small and did not eat much, and secondly because Nainu's diet consisted mostly of insects and the occasional fruit. Their arms laden with shopping bags, Kingi and Maui went to rejoin their companions. They spotted Piper standing outside of a bakery and asked why she was standing out in the cold. Piper jabbed her thumb towards the shop and said, "They won't let me in." Dumbfounded, Maui tapped his smart glasses and quickly scanned the store. Sure enough, he could detect a human on the other side of the front door. They were staring through a gap in the blinds, directly at Piper. "What's that guy got against you?" Maui asked. "Same as everyone else," Piper grunted. "Haven't you been looking around?" Kingi turned to look over the rest of the marina. Now that Piper said something, he noticed an odd thing going on. Humans and aliens alike were taking notice of Piper and intentionally keeping their distance from her. Many people gave the Wolverines suspicious glances, and when a local police officer walked by, he kept his eyes locked on Piper and placed one hand on his holster as if to say, "Give me an excuse. I dare you." Behind Kingi, the door to the shop opened up and a man emerged. He pointed at Piper and barked at her in a loud voice. "Hey you, chink! Get the hell off our porch! You're scaring away the customers!" Maui and Kingi had no idea what the word chink meant, but they could tell it was really awful because of the way Piper reacted. "Buzz the hell off, Round Eye," she snapped. "I'll leave when my friends come out." The shopkeeper pulled back the flap of his coat to reveal a weapon holstered just under his arm. "You want to eat some metal, Slant?" he growled. "Beat it." Piper started to reach for her laser pistol, but Maui stepped between her and the shopkeep. "Hey man, she's with us!" Maui tried to sound threatening, but he almost never did this sort of thing, so his voice cracked uncomfortably. "We don't want any trouble." Next to him, Kingi opened up his trench coat to reveal his plasma rifle. But before the standoff could escalate further, the door opened again and Lawrence, Jay, and Sarah emerged. The trio stopped in their tracks, and Jay quickly spoke to the shopkeeper. "Lewis, I told you to leave her alone." Shopkeeper Lewis directed his anger towards Jay now. "Dude, you know what she is, right? How do you know she's not, well, you know?" Jay did not give Lewis a chance to finish. He already knew what the accusation was going to be. "Dude, she's not the Paradox. Knock it off." The walk back to the safe house was an uncomfortable one, and not at all because of the cold. Maui kept looking from Piper to the other Wolverines and back again. With only the sound of crunching snow beneath their feet to focus on, Maui let his mind wander. He remembered the powerful hostility between Piper and her comrades, with emphasis on Lawrence. He decided he needed to know more. "Could you tell me why that happened?" Maui asked. "Why those humans had an issue with Piper?" The four Wolverines looked around at one another uncomfortably, not sure who should answer. Finally, Piper did. "It's not just me," Piper explained. "It's pretty much all Asian women. Humans who look like me have got it bad all over." "The Paradox screwed it up for everyone," Lawrence grumbled. "Not just on Earth, but before the storm, when you could travel all over the galaxy, Asian women were getting harassed everywhere just for looking like Akira. Everyone thinks I'm gonna body snatch them and brainwash their babies." Piper was so angry that steam could have risen from her head. "I've heard of some women getting attacked in the street just because someone mistook them from the Paradox. And if that ever happens to me..." Piper drew her laser pistol and aimed into the forest. There was a click, a hissing sound, and a nearby pine tree erupted into flames. The group paused to watch the tree burn. With a great crashing noise, the flaming pine keeled over and collapsed into a snowbank, leaving a curling trail of black smoke. The Wolverines' safe house was located in the wilderness about 4 miles away from Alpena. There was a road leading to the place, but it wasn't usable in wintertime. Jay, Sarah, Piper, Lawrence, Maui, and Kingi approached the safe house on foot and found it nestled deep within the forest. A century ago, this place would have been a hunter's lodge, used as temporary housing for outdoorsmen as they pursued deer and elk. During the Second Hyperspace War, the human resistance took over the building and turned it into the safe house it is now. Outfitted with modern technology and a small Alarium generator, the safe house was nearly self-sufficient and close to being inaccessible. Outside of the front entrance, Maui spotted 2 snowmobiles that had joined the 6 already present. Varian and Quarter were back. Of course, the spaceplane Niagara could not have landed here in the forest. Instead, the ship had landed in the wreckage of a former American military base about 10 miles to the west of here. Then the pair returned to the safe house via snowmobile. As soon as Maui opened the door and kicked off his shoes, Setla and Nainu both shouted from deep inside the house, "Shut the dumb door!" Everybody piled inside and closed the door quickly. to stop the heat from escaping. The inside of the safe house was very toasty, almost 80 degrees Fahrenheit. It was in this cozy cabin where the Stormbreakers and Wolverines recovered from their injuries following their fight with Jericho earlier. Nainu and Setla were both curled up around the fireplace mantle, where a large fire was warming the place far more effectively than the furnace. The two reptiles looked absolutely miserable. "This is hell," Nainu shivered. "This is what happens to Kelt who don't honor the Homeworld. How do you humans live in such a nightmarish place?" Setla spoke through chattering teeth. "Your planet has a faulty axis that tilts you away from the sun. How could the progenitors allow such a world to exist?" Varian took the groceries from Maui and said, "If we ever find the Magrathayans who built this planet, I'll be sure to file a complaint." "Magrathayans?" Nainu repeated. "Human mythology. Look up Douglas Adams," Varian replied. "All right, is everyone back? Maui, Lawrence, thank you guys for going out for food. Let's reconvene and get back to business. Our hosts said they would come back in time for dinner." All 6 Stormbreakers and the 4 Wolverines moved into the fireplace room. The reptiles stayed near the glowing wood fire, while everyone else piled into chairs and couches. Corder curled up against Setla and wrapped her long, furry tail around his legs. As the group settled in, Lawrence plugged his laptop computer into a holographic projector and pressed a few buttons. "First things first," Lawrence began. "What the hell happened here?" A hologram materialized in the middle of the room. Words at the bottom of the image revealed that this was a recording of the Niagara's targeting computer. Everyone watched as the hologram replayed the encounter with Jericho near the ruined library. The goddess struck down everybody in a single blow, then seemed to ignore the energy cannon fire coming from the Niagara. "First of all, Nainu, that was amazing," Corder said. She patted the little lizard with her paw, and Nainu's body changed color, shifting from his usual greenish-brown to a pale yellow. I wasn't really thinking," Nainu admitted. "I think I was just seeing red, honestly." Lawrence, Piper, Sarah, and Jay were studying the hologram closely. "And you guys are sure this isn't the real Jericho?" Sarah asked. "Felt pretty real when she nearly beat me to death." "We've seen her once before," Varian explained. "The fake, I mean. And my grandparents are friends of the real Jericho, and they told me all kinds of stories about her when I was a kid. She doesn't just lash out like that. It's not in her nature. Gramps and Granny can totally confirm it. Also, there's the really big Kikanalo in the room we keep ignoring," Maui cut in. Everybody looked at him. It's a pack animal native to Partoga," Maui quickly explained. "Listen, guys, are we not going to talk about the fact that both Jericho and Cassandra were using the gift?" An awkward silence hung over the room for a moment, broken by Setla's heavy breathing and the crackle of the fire in the hearth. Finally, Piper spoke. "That's impossible," she said. "Jericho destroyed the gift almost 50 years ago." "And yet we saw quite a lot of evidence to the contrary," Setla grumbled. "That green flame, that was soul fire, wasn't it?" "How could it be, though?" Varian asked. "I remember from school, soul fire is supposed to work differently. Differently than what we saw the other night, anyway." Varian pressed his or her hand to their own chest and made a pulling motion. "It's supposed to come out of your body and be steady like a candle flame, not explode all over the place," they said. "And I've never heard of telekinesis hitting everybody at once like that," Jay added. "It felt like I got smashed in the head with a sledgehammer." The Stormbreakers continued the debrief for about an hour. Topics of discussion ran from the fight with Jericho to their unexpected encounter with Inez Espinosa. "I can see why she was picked to be a Stormbreaker," Kingi said. "She was very quick to trade away her freedom to save us, even though she barely knew any of us." "She didn't know us at all," Nainu pointed out. "To her, we were probably stalkers. If she ever makes it back to Detroit, I'll bet she'll search her hyperwave history to see if we've been calling her." Varian sniggered. "Well, we did call her, so yeah, I guess that makes us stalkers." Lawrence, Piper, Sarah, and Jay all looked around. "We knew you guys weren't acting alone, but I guess we still don't have the full story," Jay said. "Someone else was picking people to be Stormbreakers?" "It's complicated," Corder replied, waving her paw. "Basically, we don't even know who we're taking orders from. But as long as the mystery man keeps paying us and hooking us up with allies, we'll keep up the mission." "And what mission is that?" Sarah asked. "What are you guys supposed to be doing?" Kingi thumped his chest with pride. "We are going to hunt down and kill Akira Robinson," he declared. Piper instinctively drew her legs up and curled into a fetal position, as though trying to hide. "We know you're not Akira. Relax," Corder purred. "Uh-huh, sure." Piper did not sound convinced. "You guys are like those freaks who pull guns on any Asian girl in the street, aren't you?" She looked at Nainu. "What, you want to stick your fingers in my eyes to make sure I'm not wearing color contacts?" "People have done that before," Lawrence quickly explained. "Lawrence, you're the one who did it!" Piper raised her voice and scrambled over the back of the couch. She was clearly afraid, bordering on paranoid. Corder stood up, her ears flat and her tail swishing. "Now hold on a moment, everyone," she growled. "Piper, we know you're not the Paradox, because I'm pretty sure she's the one who beat the crap out of us a few days ago." Silence. Piper stopped her retreat. "Wait, what?" "It's obvious," Corder said. "Who was the most powerful scion in the galaxy before Jericho showed up? Akira! If anyone could have rode out the destruction of the gift and kept her powers, it's the Paradox." Maui raised an eyebrow. "But that would suggest Akira is impersonating Jericho," he said. "Who hasn't she impersonated at this point? That's like half her modus operandi," Corder responded. "Honestly, we should have seen it sooner." Piper rejoined the conversation. She still looked apprehensive and leaned over the back of the couch to speak. "Hey, I can buy that Akira's pretending to be Jericho. I remember reading about both of them in high school history, and it makes sense, but what about that Cassandra girl? She looked like she was just 10 or 11 years old. How did she have powers before the fake Jericho showed up?" Nobody had an answer for that one. The group sat in silence for some minutes before the opening and closing of a door caught their attention. 3 more people had just arrived. Jay and Varian sprang to their feet as a man's voice called into the safe house. "We've got him! He needs food!" 3 men entered the fireplace room and joined the rest of the group. The first man was a gray-haired gentleman with a big bushy beard. He looked like the typical lumberjack who worked in the forests of northern Michigan. This was Jay's father, Robert Lansing. As Robert came inside, Maui focused on him with his smart glasses. In seconds, the digital screen embedded in the lenses produced all of the information about Robert Lansing that the Stormbreakers would ever need to know. Robert was a former member of the United Nations government. He served as the human ambassador to Auraki, a planet on the far side of the galaxy inhabited by Partogans and Levakians. 2 years ago, Robert had gotten into a heated dispute with ISO Director Scarlett Freeman. The spymaster pulled some strings with the UN leadership and Robert was fired from his post before being unceremoniously exiled to Michigan. Since then, he had been quietly helping the old Americans resist UN occupation. Jay ran to his father and helped carry the exhausted man leaning on Robert's shoulder. He was Inez Espinosa, looking far skinnier than he had just a few days ago. The professor had spent nearly a week on the run with little food or water, and it was a downright miracle he was still alive. The third and final man to enter was welcomed warmly by all of the Stormbreakers, but none of the Wolverines knew who he was. Varian quickly made introductions. Jay, Lawrence, Sarah, Piper, this is my dad. Varian's father, George Farshty, was a short, balding man with a scraggly gray beard that rivaled Robert's. He had a very round face with a jovial expression, as though he spent the winter holidays pretending to be Santa Claus. All four of the Wolverines looked confused again. Dude, Lawrence said, we've seen your family on TV. Your dad looks nothing like this guy. Varian rolled her or his eyes. That guy on TV is my mom's third husband, Varian replied. My stepfather was Randall. He's husband number 2. This guy is George Farshty, and he's my real, biological father, Mom's first husband. Jay leaned over to George and whispered, So you're Varian's dad, huh? I was wondering, is your kid a he or a she? I can't figure it out and they're not telling. George laughed and clapped Jay on the back. Oh, sorry, boy. Varian asked me not to tell, and a father keeps their children's secrets. Nainu grumbled. Could have asked me, Lansing. I already tried asking Farshty. Meanwhile, Emmanuel and Robert shed their winter clothing. Why don't we get some food into this man before he crumples like paper? Robert told the group. Then we can talk to your heart's content. With much clattering of dishware and the smell of freshly cooked meat and vegetables from the kitchen, everyone somehow managed to seat themselves around the wooden dining table. Setla nearly smashed the old chair, and instead propped himself on a bench. 13 men, women, and aliens dug into the hot meal, and for a few minutes, there was relative silence. Professor Espinosa, who had nearly died of hunger and thirst in the wilderness, was told to eat slowly, lest he make himself sick. Between bites, Sarah asked, Professor, how do you get away from the reclamation agents? They lost interest in me as soon as they realized Inez got away with Cassandra. Gave up the chase after only a little while, Emmanuel explained. I knew they'd come back for me eventually, so I started making my way up here, looking for help. I've worked with both you Wolverines and Varian Stormbreakers before, so I knew coming out here was my best bet. You were lucky Robert and I were out hunting deer today, George said. You overshot the safe house by a mile. If we missed you, you would have wandered right onto Lake Huron and frozen to death. I'm grateful, Emmanuel replied. But what about Cassandra and Inez? Where are they? Taking it in turns, the Stormbreakers and Wolverines brought the professor up to speed on recent events. When they got to the fight against the False Jericho, Emmanuel dropped his fork and gasped, Holy Mother of Jericho! She really appeared? So the progeny was telling the truth. Wait, progeny? Lawrence asked. Who were they? A group of religious extremists, Varian said. They've taken Jericho worship to the next level. My team has had a few run-ins with them. They had a fake Jericho in the Altair star system, Nainu added. Looks like they found a way to bring her to Earth. A loud noise brought the focus back to Emmanuel. He had slammed his mug of hot cider onto the table in anger. They took Cassandra? He seethed. Yeah, Piper confirmed. There wasn't really anything we could do. After Jericho dropped us all, the UN soldiers just came in and plucked her and Inez off the roof. Emmanuel clutched his fists and vented his anger. After all the trouble I've went through to get Cassandra out of that damn lab! What a waste! Emmanuel looked like he was going to cry. Nainu stood up from his seat and, treading carefully, the little lizard walked across the table and put an arm around the professor's shoulders. It's not over yet, friend, Nainu reassured him. We'll find a way to get Cassandra and your daughter away from Bannock. I don't see how, Emmanuel replied. Security will be tighter at the base now. We can't get in. We may not have to enter Bannock base, Kingi interrupted. Look at this. Kingi pushed his half-eaten meal aside and set his laptop on the table. He keyed in a few commands and then turned the screen so that everyone could see. A map of the Bannock base appeared on the screen, complete with a blinking red dot that was moving slowly across the second-floor cafeteria. That's Inez, Kingi said. We've got her position to within half a meter. If she leaves the base for any reason, we'll know. How? How did you get a tracker on her? Emmanuel asked, astounded. We copied some old Advent technology, Varian explained. Inez was a regular visitor at the gene therapy clinic in Grosse Pointe. Every person who has ever had a gene therapy session gets injected with a tracking chip. Don't ask me why. It's an Advent thing that just carried over when the UN took power. Anyway, we stole all of the data for Inez's tracking chip a while ago. Then we just needed to get a homing beacon within 5 feet of Inez so we could lock onto the signal. We had some help there. And presto, we now know Inez's exact location at all times. Piper's eyes widened. That is so wrong and so scary on so many levels, she said. The gene therapy clinics are tracking their patients? Really? So does that mean... Yes, Varian grumbled. Theoretically, you can track anyone who's visited a clinic. Here, check this out. Varian took Kingi's laptop and keyed in a new command. Before I joined the Stormbreakers, Varian explained, I was like the most frequent visitor at the gene therapy clinic in Honolulu. See? There I am. That's me. Varian turned the screen again. This time, it was a map of Alpena showing the surrounding region, complete with a blinking red dot showing Varian's exact location within the safe house. Robert Lansing took the laptop and examined the screen. Meanwhile, Jay looked at Varian with a raised eyebrow. Have you ever thought about getting the chip removed, Varian? Varian nodded. Yeah, but the trouble is, I don't know where it is. Gotta find it first, you know? Meanwhile, Robert set down the tablet and started writing some notes on a scrap of paper. So, we're going back to the drawing board, he said. But at least we know where to start.